So the sequel that I didn't think would ever happen, happened, and it's here. Let's review it. Pacific Rim Uprising is directed by Stephen S. DeKnight and is the sequel to Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim from 2013. 10 years have gone by since the end of the war between the kaiju and the Jaegers. John Boyega plays Jake Pentecost, who is the son of Marshall Pentecost, played by Idris Elba from the first movie. So the Jaeger program has apparently been picked up again by the Pan-Pacific Defense Corps, and Jake Pentecost is not like his dad at all. He's not a Jaeger pilot, but he is dragged back into the program along with a young girl to get back into piloting Jaegers, only for certain events to happen that involve a rogue Jaeger and the return of the kaiju from the breach. You guys saw my updated review for Pacific Rim just a while ago, and that was a movie that I originally loved when it first came out. Nowadays, I just like the movie. A lot of the problems with that first one are painfully obvious, but the stuff that I really liked in that movie, I downright loved. So it would be the definition of a guilty pleasure, except I don't feel any shame in saying that I like Pacific Rim. It's not like Independence Day, where I could easily say that movie's a guilty pleasure. Pacific Rim Uprising looked like it had a lot of elements that would make it better than the first Pacific Rim, because it looks like they addressed all the complaints of the first movie. You have a more charismatic lead, you have fight scenes that take place during the daytime, so there's a lot that this movie had going for it to be better, but it's not. Sad to say, Pacific Rim Uprising falls very short of what the first movie built upon. Now, since a bunch of other people out there, including myself, have called the first Pacific Rim the Independence Day for monster movies, is Pacific Rim Uprising the Independence Day resurgence of monster movies, where it's just that bad? I can tell you right now, no. There were parts of it that reminded me of Independence Day Resurgence, but as the movie itself, I didn't think it was as bad as Resurgence was. Part of it does come from the fact that I'm kind of biased when it comes to giant monsters, or just giant things in general beating the shit out of each other. That's my kryptonite right there. That's one of the reasons why I can't hate Jurassic World. Unlike Independence Day Resurgence, and unlike the first Pacific Rim, you have a more charismatic lead. John Boyega definitely has a lot of star power. He carries this movie, and he can be very charming. However, I don't think he was fully fleshed out as a character. There's never a point where he flat out disappears in the movie because, he's the main character. But in terms of what the movie was actually focused on, I felt like this was a little more scatterbrained in terms of focusing on individual aspects. Which the first Pacific Rim, I'll give it credit, even though it had elements that I wasn't fully interested in, it focused on the big picture. But hey, at least John Boyega doesn't sound like he's narrating a trailer when he's giving out lines, because that was one thing that really killed Charlie Hunnam in the first movie. Which, by the way, they don't even mention throughout this entire movie except for one little name drop that's in passing, and you might miss it if you're not paying attention. I guess they just really thought, yeah, Idris Elba really should have been the main character of that first movie, so let's just go ahead and make his son the main character in this one, and that was a good choice. And outside of a more charismatic lead, this movie does a lot to make itself feel different from the first movie, because the first movie really had an emphasis on the kaiju and how they functioned. The Jaegers were cool, and we got to see how they worked as well, but I feel like a lot of the movie was focused more on the kaiju. Whereas the first movie felt more like something in the vein of Godzilla or Gamera, this one feels more like in the vein of Gundam Wing or Transformers, which this movie is infinitely better than all the Transformers movies put together. This movie's emphasis is more on the Jaegers, and the action scenes are still very entertaining, and they all take place during the day. And the 3D actually works really well here, because I remember seeing the first Pacific Rim in 3D twice, once in regular 3D and once in IMAX, and it really didn't do that much for me. And part of the problem was because the movie was set during night most of the time, so it was really hard to see because of the 3D. This movie takes place during the day, it's bright as can be, and the 3D really does play an impact in certain areas. There are some points where some Jaegers are shooting missiles towards the camera, and I had to dodge the same way John Boyega's character dodged that missile in the trailer. So it's ultimately a very fun movie if you're going in there for the Jaeger and Kaiju battles. And one other person I did like in this movie was Cailee Spaeny. She's one of the new recruits for the Jaeger program, and at first I was pretty annoyed by her character. But after a while, she started to grow on me, and she pretty much ends up being the Mako of this movie. Doesn't really have much of an arc, but the actress still did a good job, and I guess I should just segue into what sucks about this movie. Because there are some elements in this movie that I not only didn't like, I downright hated. For one, this movie feels very underwhelming and at points kind of uneventful. A lot of it is sort of establishment for the big finale, which part of me doesn't mind because there is a mystery going on concerning a rogue Jaeger. You're wondering what's going on with this, how is this linked back up to the kaiju? So there are points in the movie that will keep you guessing for what's going on, unlike Independence Day Resurgence, where it's just a UFO bigger than the United States. That's nothing at all. There are also a lot of attempts at humor in this movie that I didn't think work at all. They didn't make me cringe in terms of how bad they were. They were just kind of like, I think that was supposed to be funny, but I'm not laughing so much. Scott Eastwood is the second lead in this movie, playing John Boyega's co-pilot, and I gotta say, he really is starting to look a lot like his dad, Clint. I just wish he was a better actor, because he's not that charismatic in this movie. He's pretty much in this movie what Liam Hemsworth was in Independence Day Resurgence. I don't have anything at all against Scott Eastwood. I just think that he lacks the charisma that Clint Eastwood had in the past when he was much younger. And then the last thing about the movie I'll have to say that I didn't like was Charlie Day. Let me just say this, without spoiling anything. If you were annoyed by his character in the first Pacific Rim, you are going to despise him in this movie. What they do with his character here, I won't say anything else. I'll save that for the spoiler review. So Pacific Rim Uprising, it did have a lot of issues, and while I do admire a lot of the technical aspects, the monster fights, and John Boyega as a leading man, there's just so much in this movie that felt kind of flat and underwhelming that I can't in good conscience say that it's a good movie, but it's not something I downright hate. I would say watch at your own risk. If you absolutely want to see this movie, then go ahead. If you're looking at it just for the monster action, then you're gonna get it. I would say just lower your expectations. But if you weren't a fan of the first Pacific Rim, this one's not gonna change your opinion at all. You're still not gonna like this movie if you didn't like the first one. And that's my review for Pacific Rim Uprising. Check back here in a couple days for my spoiler review containing some of your Stardust reactions. So if you want your reaction featured in my spoiler review for Pacific Rim Uprising, go ahead, download the app, create a profile, tag me in your reactions, and I'll pick out the best reactions to feature on the video. So until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on the movie, if and when you've seen it. And as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.